Men and women of Reddit who caught their significant others cheating. How did you do that? And what was your reaction? My ex-husband and his family smoked a lot of pot, still do. His sister, kids, and nanny were visiting from out of state for a few weeks. When it was time to fly home, they left their stash at my ex-Mill's house because they didn't want to take it on the plane. My ex asked if I would pick it up because I was nearby. Stupidly, I agree. I don't smoke and I was willing to carry it in my car for him. To my surprise, I found a note from the nanny to my ex saying she was in love with him and she was so happy for the time they had together. Obviously, she thought he would get the weed instead of me. While it was incredibly painful at the time, I am definitely living my best life 15 years later. My ex-husband was an early adopter of sending pics. I got his phone to get the numbers of his friends to invite them to a surprise birthday party while he was sleeping off a hangover, and there they were in his outbox. ETA, this was more than 12 years ago. When camera phones were barely functional. Wife was acting unusual for a few weeks. She would want to spend time by herself on the weekends, and when she came home at night from work she would often sit in the driveway for 20 minutes on the phone. I'm not dumb. I bought a voice-activated digital recorder and stuck it in her car. I knew what I needed to know in less than 24 hours. I was in the Navy and was out on deployment for 6 months after just recently getting engaged. It's one of those stupid things that young military guys do. One day I get a letter from my fiancé's best friend telling me that she caught my fiancé and her BF together. This was years before email and smartphones were common. We write back and forth several times and eventually it comes out how she caught them, how my fiancé begged her not to tell me, and that the fiancé didn't know that we were corresponding. I eventually get back to the States and plan to play it off as though I didn't know, but too many of my friends intercepted me with the news that it wasn't just the one guy, but several, and let me know that she knew that I was aware. Eventually we met, and the confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up hooking up, at first as sort of a revenge kind of thing, but turned serious. We celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary this year. Edit, maths. This year will be 31. After 20, it's all a blur. I had some really good friends in the next town over where my girlfriend lived, and they figured it out for me. They were super gentle about it, and patient with me through my denial. Same thing happened with me. My best friend was friends with my GF and her roommates. Word got to my friend about her bringing some dude home after a party, and my friend eventually spilled to me. As she said, I really don't want to tell you this and I know this will crush you, but I can't keep this from you. After she dropped the bomb I was like, hell no. That would never happen. And then I confronted my GF about it that night, who broke down and confessed everything. I stayed with that girl for another 7 months, and God bless my friend for sticking by my side and supporting the whole way. When I finally ended things, my best friend was still there to support me and care for me. Also, haven't dated anyone for longer than 6 months since that happened 7 years ago. Edit, thanks for the love, friends. I'm doing well. It was a rough few years at first, but I've found my joys and hobbies and have gotten comfortable with myself. I've learned to love myself and enjoy the life I have. If a lady wants to join me on the adventure, that's great. But I'm happy with who I am and where I am. Love you all. My ex was a big drinker and I wasn't. She would frequent this bar close to our place pretty often with friends. I rarely went because I just wasn't a fan of bars or her drinking friends. One night she went out with a couple that I didn't mind that much. I was bored at home, so I decided to head over for a little bit. As I walk in, I see my ex sitting at the bar with the couple. The bar was packed, and as soon as I made eye contact my ex, she had this strange look on her face. She turns to this guy sitting next to her, and he immediately gets up and leaves. I felt something strange right away, but I brushed it off as me being irrational. I stayed for like an hour and headed home. I couldn't shake the feeling I had though, so I checked one of her friends' Facebook page to see if there was any connection that existed between my ex and this random dude. Sure enough, he was friends with one of my ex's friends. I knew his name now and that I wasn't as crazy as I thought. I sat on the information though. The next weekend she goes out drinking again and still had not returned home at 4 a.m. I tried contacting her multiple times and I got no response. I woke up to her coming home at 7 a.m. and jumping in the shower immediately. I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower, and she kept all of the messages with this same guy. Some pretty telling information in the text thread. While she was still showering, I grabbed a fresh pair of clothes and headed to my best friend's house. 20 minutes later, I get a phone call with her going ape about me leaving and not saying anything. I laughed at the projection, told her that if she wasn't moved out by Monday, the police would be there to force her out. She wasn't on the lease and her parents lived 10 minutes away from me. That was that. She confessed to her mom. Then mother-in-law called her other daughter and told her. Sister-in-law then called me and told me. She let me listen in on a three-way call to her mom and tried to convince mom to tell me, but she refused, which basically confirmed it. He went to Hawaii for a business trip without his wife and kids. Like a good wife, I packed his clothes before he left and unpacked his dirty laundry when he returned home. I found a tiny pair of white cotton panties, no lace, in his suitcase. He had recently dropped a lot of weight, greater than 100 pounds, and played it off that he had bought them for himself. They had no label and were simple bikinis, so theoretically could have been men's as well. It did sort of explain the pretty brunette that followed him off the plane at the airport and kept looking at my kids and I at the luggage carousel, wanting to make his side piece come face to face with his wife and kids. I made sure he wore those panties at least once a week for the remaining few months we were together. I set out his clothes every day and he couldn't protest. It wasn't a big damn breaking moment. It was a lot of little things. Like how she'd cancel plans at the last second. Or the random phone calls from unknown numbers she'd get. This was back before spam calls were an epidemic. Or how her phone was mysteriously off one night when I needed to get a hold of her. I had my suspicions and then finally it clicked into place when I did some Instagram snooping and found a guy who followed her who posted a selfie wearing a very unique jacket that belonged to her. I confronted her the next day. She denied it. Tears. Begging. All of that. I dumped her and walked away. The next day I messaged the guy on Instagram and he confirmed everything. Had no idea I existed. He dumped her too. Last I heard she's an EMT in Utah, Wyoming. Hope she figured out how not to be a garbage person. 4 years ago I was dating a girl who became distant and disinterested in a lot of things we both enjoyed together. Despite attempts to talk about it, she only grew more distant, then became less available to hang out and suddenly was working late a lot. I started getting suspicious about cheating when she was on her phone nonstop. Again I tried to talk about it but she wouldn't engage. She also just didn't want to break up with me for whatever reason. I was actually going to end it on my own, but one weekend when she was seemingly unavailable, some mutual friends told me they spotted her with a dude from her work and they were all over each other. Coincidentally, she had also lent me her iPad and it was synced to her phone, so I saw lots of texts between those two over that weekend. They were talking about running away together, etc. He was married and her supervisor. Mutual friends were also composed of her coworkers and reported them to HR. They were both forced to do training on not sleeping with coworkers, they were both denied promotion, his wife left him, and she moved overseas. Sucked at the time, I was devastated, but karma got them good.
I couldn't find my then wife after she got off work one afternoon/evening. I tried to call her cell phone with no answer. She didn't show up to the house until 9:30 p.m. She weaved some tale about getting stuck in traffic. I did some sleuthing and pulled the State Farm Good Driving app up, which tracks your movements. I found out she had been leaving work early, going to the nearby rest area off of the expressway, and having sex with a 20-something trucker she met at her previous job. I decided to interrupt the festivities one afternoon. I showed up to the rest area, parked in front of his rig, and jumped right up to the door. The cabin shade was drawn. I withdrew the shades and saw my loving ex-wife with a meth pipe in her hand and was going to town on this guy. He had the gall to tell me to give them privacy. I did handle it very well. I called the cops. They both were arrested for possession, and I promptly filed for divorce. The icing on the cake is that a few months after I left, she cheated on her new trucker friend and is well on her way to her 7th friend. Godspeed, you wet, musty nightmare. My now ex Husband demanded constant access to all of my social media and cell phone messages and was constantly accusing me of cheating, even though he had no reason to think I would do that. I had nothing to hide. Never even thought of cheating. I was watching our young kids 24/7 and didn't even have transportation since he accidentally totaled my car. One day I handed over my phone for him to check for other men and asked to see his. He hesitated, but then handed it over. There was a long sexual text history with one of the teenage girls who works for him. He tells me he's in love with her and wants her to move in with us. I was in total shock, dropped his phone, cracking it. He retaliated by breaking my laptop. He's a wonderful man, and I miss him everyday sarcasm. I had come home from a 5-month cruise. My GF at the time was a court stenographer. So when she was at the pier, I figured she had a case or was catching up on transcripts. So I got a ride from my friend to see unfamiliar BMW in my driveway. I walk in to see her blowing some stranger on my couch. Keep in mind, this was my house, not hers. I didn't say a word to her. I just started grabbing her shit and throwing it in the front yard and called her father to come pick her up because her car was an old Quattro and in the shop, again. And up to that point, I was letting her drive mine until it was fixed. I will not bore you with the drama, but she was taken by the MA instead of her dad. I had my suspicions, but it was her who ended up telling me. I went into the relationship thinking, wow, I don't deserve this girl, way out of my league. She couldn't help but remind me how much better he was several times and made sure to rub it in my face. My reaction was a spiral and a deep depression. For someone that has very low self-esteem, being cheated on is one of the worst feelings. It feels like it confirms all your worst thoughts about yourself. Edit. I just want to say thanks to all the encouraging comments. This was some years ago, and I'm in a happy relationship. I still struggle with depression, but I think even without this incident, I'd still be depressed, but I'm working on it. To anyone currently experiencing this, it's not the end of the world despite it feeling that way. You are worth more than you know, and I know you will see that someday.